welcome to UWC student sharing session. So shall we begin? So good evening and welcome to the first session of our student sharing series. And today we're going to talk about academics and why UWC. So I hope you enjoyed our previous video and get to know a bit more about UWC. So let me first introduce myself and today's lineup. So I'm Cheryl, a graduate of class of 2019 from LPC UWC. And before LPC, I attended local school in Shatin, and I'm currently attending HKU as a year 3 nursing student. So today we are very happy to have two current students to share with us. So should I pass the time for them to introduce themselves?
Hi everyone, my name is Brianne. Prior to attending LPC, I went to a local co-ed school in Kowloon City, and I'm currently a second-year student at LPC.
Hi guys, my name is Finesse. I'm also a current second-year student at LPC, and before coming, I went to a local girls' school in Tin Hau.
All right, so for our session today, we're gonna divide it into two parts. We're gonna first have panels sharing, and then after that we're going to have a Q&A session for everyone to ask any questions, so if you guys want to ask anything, just feel free to type them in the chat box. Make sure you send it to everyone anytime during the panel session, and we will address them as much as we can during the Q&A session. So without further ado, let's get started with our panel session. So let's start with our first question. So back to the very basics. So how and what do you know about UWC, and what was your first impression on it?
So I guess I can start first. So I first learned about UWC/LPC through one of my friends back at my old school. She was a grade higher up than me. And then the year before I came, she applied to LPC, she got in. And then she told me more about the school, and she told me more about UWC. And I was really interested in attending a boarding school. And also I was really interested in the UWC values and missions on its own. So I decided to apply. And as for my first impression of UWC, I thought that it was very interesting. And because I did Model United Nations before coming, so I with like students from different countries and also everyone discussing different topics like global issues, I found it an environment I like a lot.
Yeah, so for me, I also know UWC from some of the people I know. So I actually first heard of LPC or UWC from my English tutor. So she told me that UWC is actually an IB school because I was studying in a DSC school before. And my first impression of UWC, I guess, is that it is a boarding school with people from different countries. So it's kind of like getting an experience of like overseas boarding, but you're actually still in Hong Kong. So I find it very interesting.
All right, like for me, I think at the very beginning, I didn't really know about UWC. Like for me, I think I searched it on like YouTube, and I think I find quite a lot of clips back then, quite different. But then, yeah, I think UWC at the very beginning too, everyone is like, wow, boarding school, like in Hong Kong, like, wow, what an experience. But then what actually motivated you guys to apply to UWC, like at the very beginning?
I guess for me, when I first applied, I didn't really think I would. First of all, I didn't think I would get in, and also I didn't really plan on coming here because for my previous school, I've been attending like school since I was in kindergarten, so I was in a very like comfortable environment, and I didn't really think that I would like switch schools. But at the same time, I guess I wanted like a change of environment, and I guess UWC or LPC or like the IB curriculum compared to the local curriculum could give me what I want. For example, if I want to study overseas, and also I like the like teaching or learning style a bit more, so I decided to give it a try and apply to the school.
Yeah, so same as Brian, when I first heard of LPC, I didn't really think about like I'm not very determined in applying. I just wanted to give it a try. But I think my like the turning point of me really wanting to get into LPC is when I came to the info day of LPC. I still remember there's like an alumni sharing session, and one of the alumni told me that in LPC you meet people from different countries. So when you go travel in different countries in the world, you can visit your friends. And at that time, I was like, wow, I've never actually thought of meeting like a lot of people, so many people from like different countries and cultures. So that's I think that's what mainly like motivates me to apply to LPC.
Also, I think the two of you took DSC before IB, right? So like what act like are you worried at the very beginning when you apply to like UWC or like OPC, like because you have to like jump from DSC from a very traditional curriculum to IB, which is like quite different. Like how do you adjust to it, or like any concerns at the very beginning? Because I think a lot of people here, like a lot of audience, I think having the same concerns as well.
So I guess I can share my own concern. So I actually applied during Form 5. Like, I guess usually people apply in Form 4 and then they come and study the last 2 years of high school. But for me, I kind of have to like do an extra year. So I guess that was a really, really big concern of mine because I could just have stayed in my old school. I already started the DSE curriculum. Like I was going to my second last year. So I wasn't sure if I wanted to like sort of take the risk of starting a new curriculum over again and adapting to everything and picking up even new subjects because subjects in IB can be very different from DSE. So that was my biggest concern when applying.
So for me, I apply when I was in Form 4, so I don't have the concern that Brianne has because I'm still continuing like the last 2 years of my high school. But then for me, the biggest concern is academics because in DSC, it's it's very exam oriented. So as long as you do enough exercises, you practice enough for exams, you'll be fine. But I knew that for IB, it's totally different because you can't just get good marks or just learn just because you did enough exercises or homework. So I guess that's my biggest concern to adapt to like a new learning style. Yeah.
May I know more like what subject do you guys take back then in DSE, and what did you take in IB?
So so at my previous school, I actually took really different subjects compared to the ones I'm taking in IB. So apart from the four core subjects we had to take, I took chemistry, biology, and history. So I took a lot of like science subjects. But then after coming to LPC, I guess because I already did like 1 to 2 years of DSE, so I realized that my interest doesn't really lie in science, but more in humanities subjects. So during IB now, I take HL, English, Language and Literature, History and Global Politics. And for my SL, I do Math, Chinese Literature, and Biology.
For me, in my previous school, I studied Chinese, English, math, which is like compulsory. And then I also take biology, history, and English literature as my electives. But in LPC, I actually choose quite different subjects. I still take Chinese literature and English literature, and also math. But then for my electives, I tried economics, biology, and global politics. And especially for economics and global politics, they are not subjects that I study in my old school. So it's quite different for me.
So which subject in particular do you think is like the most different? Like I think a lot of people like who told me about like IB and DSE like versus comparing them, I personally think is Chinese, because back in Chinese, like back in DSE, like we always have to like memorize a lot of stuff for Chinese, and then but then like now when we transfer like to IB, it's like a total different style. Like, what do you think about like the comparison between like IB and DSE?
Yeah, just adding on to Cheryl on like language classes. I think it's not only for Chinese, but like language classes in general, especially because we came from local schools. If like for example for Chinese and English, back at our old schools, we had to do like for example like comprehension, writing, and like speaking, and very like exam orientated um, exams like practices. But here at LPC, when you learn language, I feel like you actually learn more about the language and different types of texts. Because for IB, you can choose if you want to study language and literature or pure literature. So for English, I do language and literature, but for Chinese, I do literature. So I guess there's a comparison between the both. For example, for language and literature, you can learn more about movies or advertisements, song lyrics, poems, and also read like plays. And for literature, it's more about reading like poems or like stories, novels, and stuff like that, which I don't think you usually learn a lot in local curriculums. And also here at LPC, I think you learn like for each like text you read, you really go deeply into like for example, the content or why the writer wrote this, and um, it's more in-depth learning compared to like very general and exam oriented studies during local school.
For me, I think apart from languages, science subject for me, biology is also very different from my old school because I also took biology back in my DSE curriculum school. And at that time, we covered quite a lot of topics. But then here in LPC, we cover, I guess, less topics, but we study more in depth. So I remember there's a topic about diffusion and like transportation of like cells. In my old school, we only cover it in like 3 lessons, but in IB curriculum, we actually spend almost a month learning it. So we have so much more in-depth learning into this topic, and I find it actually so much more interesting because I don't have to, just only memorize the stuff that I learned on a textbook, but actually understand the concepts, do the experiments myself, and understand it myself. So I really like this way of like figuring out like knowledge by myself instead of like just reading it from the textbook. So I think that's what makes the biggest difference for me. Yeah.
I think maybe adding on to Vanessa about like learning sciences because we're in the same biology class. So during science back at local schools, it's a lot about like spoon feeding learning. So like the teachers tell you the content, or even when you do experiments, you just follow everything. Like the teachers prepare everything for you, including the volume of your solutions to what apparatus you have to use. But here it's very different because, for example, for us, we have to do something called an internal assessment where I think we'll elaborate more later on, but we do have to design our own experiment. So we come up with our own question. For example, for you can share about your experiment, maybe about plants. So like, for example, if you have some observations in like real life, for example, I'm doing my experiment on caffeine. So I'm really like interested in this topic. So you can actually design a whole experiment based on your something you would like to learn more about. And then you design your whole experiment, and from what solution to use and what apparatus to use, you have to decide on your own. And the whole experiment, you'll just have to you'll have to do everything on your own, and your teacher would help you, but then it's very much about learning on your own instead of getting spoon feed different knowledge.
Then do you think it is like, is it hard when you transit from DS, like your previous curriculum to IB? Because from what I can hear, it's like quite different, Like, do you find it hard last year?
Well, I think for me, I didn't really find it very challenging because I think we were quite lucky that in between, like, because we came into LPC in 2020 September, and in 2020 we had like COVID, so we were at home for a really long period of time. So when we got accepted back in like March, we had quite a long period of time where we only had online school, and then we had more free time, I guess we could say that. So I guess for me, I had more time to mentally prepare myself to transit into a different curriculum. And also, I feel like for like the first month or two at LPC, teachers are really understanding of everyone trying to transition into a new curriculum. Um, and like they've given us a lot of support, and also our second years have gave us a lot of like advice and also different tips for transiting into IB. So I think for me, I didn't really struggle a lot in terms of switching different curriculums.
Yeah, for me, I also find it okay. Like, it's not like very challenging for me to switch from DSC to IB, and I think it's mainly because the teachers here are like really supportive. For each of us, we have a tutor, which is a teacher that lives in the same residential block as us, and they're like our parents at school. So we can always find our tutors, and they will explain each subject clearly to us, so we will make like the correct subject choices that we actually will enjoy and will want to learn about. And also here in LPC, the teachers are always encouraging us to ask questions. So whenever I have something that I don't really understand or I find difficult, I can always just ask teachers or ask my peers. So I feel like it's not very challenging for me because I get like a lot of support and help from people around me, and I'm really grateful for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that as well because I kind of switched from like a local curriculum to IB as well. And I think one of the good thing in LPC is that it's like a 2-year college only. So when people come into your school, like everyone comes from different backgrounds, different curriculums, and everyone starts from the very beginning when they enter LPC or UWC. So everyone starts at the same level, and there won't be like anyone who's like better than like others or like more elite. And the fact that like LPC or UWC is such a tight knit community, like people are so supportive. And I think like one thing you talk about like the tutor, I think it's like one good thing about LPC as well, because I remember like back then, because I was taking M2 in DSE and I was like, okay, let me take math HL and IB. And then thanks God my tutor took me out from it. But then because they will also like give some wise advice to you. Like they will tell you whether you need that for your uni or not. And they'll give a lot of advice and support. So yeah, I agree with that. So moving on to the next question. What do you think is the biggest difference between UWC and your previous school? Like no matter academics or like activities wise?
I think the biggest difference between UWC and my previous school, which studies the local DSC curriculum, is that we actually can choose levels, difficulty levels for our subjects. So in DSC, I guess we don't really have like a choice of choosing higher level or standard level, but in LPC, we can choose 3 subjects of higher level, which we cover more contents and we also go more in depth within those contents, and 3 standard levels, which we just study more basic stuff. So I guess that's the biggest difference because in IB, I can put more focus on my higher level subjects, which are the subjects that I feel like I'm more interested in. For example, for me, I took higher level global politics, economics, and biology. So I really enjoy putting time into these 3 subjects because I'm more interested in them, I guess. And for my standard level subjects, I can just spend less time studying it and just put more focus on my higher level subjects, which is something I really like because I can, spend more time and effort into things I actually enjoy. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess I can share about maybe like non-academic life. So I think for me, because I really enjoy doing EOTC, which is like education outside the classroom, so I really enjoy doing different extracurricular activities, even back at my old school. So I think the difference between like LPC and my previous school was that here at LPC, they give you a lot of freedom and also a lot of support for students doing non-academic activities, because back at my old school, academic was a really important part of school life, and then teachers would always like try to like this sort of like discourage you from joining a lot of different activities, and they always remind you that like studying is the most important like part of your school life. Not saying that LPC is not like does not stress on academics. Academics is still a really large part of our school, but then at the same time, I feel like the school is really supportive for students in balancing their lives between extracurriculars and academics. For example, all students join at least 2 extracurricular activities on campus. And then we have a lot of CAS, which is creativity, activity, and service, activities on campus. So for me, that's really interesting. And I think that part is one of my favorite part about LPC, because I get to do a lot more stuff that I'm interested in and I'm passionate in, apart from just studying from textbooks.
Right. Once since you talk about EOTCs and also some of your activities, just a heads up. So next week, on 7th of September, we're going to have another session talking about EOTC, so extracurricular activities and also residential life. So make sure you guys stay tuned and also sign up for that session too. All right, jump back to our discussion. So how about UWC values? Like, what do you think about it? And do you have that in mind before you come to LPC or UWC?
Before coming to LPC, I'm already aware of the UWC values, and I actually find it really interesting that there's a school in Hong Kong that not just stress on like studying and academics, but also have their own like values and their like things that they want to pursue. So I'm very aware of the UWC value before coming, and I think the most like important or interesting UWC value to me is intercultural understanding. Before coming to LPC, I'm like already interested in learning about different cultures and countries, but I usually only learn it through, for example, news or like reading books and movies. But in LPC, I actually meet people from different countries, so I can listen to their stories. I can learn about their cultures and their backgrounds according to what they actually experienced. I still remember very clearly that a few months ago, there's a military coup in Myanmar. Normally, maybe I would just learn about it through the news or like read articles about it. But because in LPC, my roommate is from Myanmar, I actually like can listen to her firsthand stories from her family back home, and also her own opinions on the history and politics of Myanmar. So I guess in LPC, I'm more exposed to the world, and I actually can learn about the real, like, actual culture of that country, which I think is very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Vanessa, and I think that a lot of students who come to LPC are interested in the UWC values, like even before coming. And I guess that's like the reasons, like they're sort of the reasons that motivated us to apply to the school. And for me, I think the UWC value that interests me the most was compassion and service. I think I've always enjoyed doing like community service and like using what I have to give back to the society. But the reason why I think, as for now, that interests me the most, or like, I think is the most interesting one, is because I think after coming to LPC, I've actually learned more about this value, not just saying that, because I think everyone knows that we should like become, we should give back to society. But then after coming here, I think talking to different people and learning about different cultures and backgrounds of different students, you actually develop a sense of compassion, and you're really grateful for what you have, and that motivates you to help those in need and actually um, um, just practice the UWC missions.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that as well. Because back then, like in our previous schools, I think we're more focused on like academics rather than like these like different values. But then now, like after entering like LPC or UWC, when we talk more about UWC values, it actually gets into us like a lot. And especially in LPC, we have some forums, like we call it global issue forums, like just to introduce to others. Yeah, so it's basically a forum that we actually discuss different global topics in depth, speaking from different culture backgrounds. And I think that forum actually brings a lot of different values to us and actually build us or like build us up or like develop our mindset a lot. And what about like compared to before you entering LPC? Like how has your behavior or mentality changed after learning more about like the topic at LPC?
For me, as I just mentioned, I feel like the way and also my attitude towards like learning about different cultures and different countries are very like changed a lot after coming to LPC, because before coming, as I mentioned, I only gained like secondhand information through reading books and news, and I won't actually pay like a lot of attention on it because I feel like it's so far away from me. Like the things that are happening on global news are not related to me at all. So I would just read about them and maybe forget about it. But after coming to LPC, I realized that things that are happening in the world are actually also affecting me and people around me. And I know people personally, I know people from the countries that like from countries that have many issues on the news. And I kind of realized that um, I couldn't just think that not everything is not like relatable to me, that I would pay more attention to it. I would do more research. I would more actively ask my friends. I would share it to my family. So I guess after coming to LPC, I become more interested in learning deeply about different cultures and social issues. So yeah, that's how my behavior changes, I think.
Well, I think for me, in terms of like mentality, I think before coming to LPC, I was very aware of these topics, but sometimes I wouldn't know what to do or like what actions to take. But then after coming, I think because the school gives us so much like activities such as like the Global Issues Forum or different activities we have on campus or like classes we have that we study so much about things are going on in the world that I become more knowledgeable in these like topics and also more aware. So I actually take action to try to like practice these missions and also to to spread the message to other people that are not in LPC. For example, one of the UWC values is respect for the environment. So prior coming to LPC, I didn't really know much about like sustainability and like being more environmentally friendly. But then after coming, I joined like extracurriculars relating to like sustainability, and the school also educates us a lot. So I think not only I take like personal action to protect the environment, but I also tell my friends back in my old school about this, and I tell this about the concept of sustainability back to my family. And I think that this is the mentality that I gained after coming to LPC, is that I would like to spread the message more and actually take action that can influence society or at least the people around me.
Then do you think it has motivated you to take actions on global issues like in the future or now, since these issues actually gets you more personal after you actually like know more about it?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? There's a Wi-Fi connection problem.
No worries. So I was just asking, do you think it has motivated you to take more actions into like different global issues because these issues actually get you more personal now?
Yeah, I think for me, definitely, because before coming to LPC, like I was in Form 5, so I also thought a lot about like what to study in university and what like career choices I should take. But then it was very difficult because I feel like I don't really know what I wanted to do. But then after coming to LPC, um, like the subject I wanted to study back then compared to now is like very, very different. As I've mentioned that I'm involved in more like QCs about sustainability, and also like I just generally am more aware of the sustainability concept. But at the same time, I was always very interested in politics, and for now, I think that someday I really want to do something related to maybe public policy and like environmental studies. So that's something I'm really really interested in doing, and maybe someday I would like to work in a international organization related to this and actually bring impact to Hong Kong or to this world if possible.
Yeah, and I also think that LPC definitely encouraged me to think more and learn more, um, because now that I'm in this environment full of people from different countries, and I'm in this environment that really encouraged me to learn more about different social issues and things that are actually impacting the world, I think that this mindset will stay with me in the future, and I would like be more willing to pay more attention and be more aware of things happening around me, and I'll try more to think of like actions that I can actually do to help other people. So yeah.
It was nice to hear about that. I guess as a graduate, like after 2 years of LPC, I totally agree with that because I think studying in UWC or LPC with like different like different people with different cultural backgrounds, I think it's like a privilege for us. And therefore, I guess for me, I do think it's like still in my mind, like the values, everything. And I would say, like even like after we graduate, it might be even harder. But then, yes, definitely agree with that. Um, Move on to our next question. So let's just have a very chill one. Like let's talk about like your day in LPC. Like, how is it like to study there, or like, or how do you I don't know, like how do you manage your activities together with your studies, or how is your day like in LPC?
So for in LPC, classes started at 8:30 a.m. in the morning, and because we live inside campus, so our residential block is very near the academic block, so we don't have to wake up like really really early before going to school. So for me, I usually just wake up at 8 o'clock and just get myself ready, go to school. So for our academics, we have 5 lessons every day and 1 hour per lesson. So we have 3 lessons in the morning, and then we have lunchtime, and then we also have 2 lessons after lunch. So lessons usually ends at 3:30. So for me, in Mondays and Wednesdays in a week, I will have QC activities, which is like extracurricular activities that is held by IB in the school. So I would just participate in those activities. And for other days, I guess I will maybe do my own revision, or I will just hang out with friends inside campus. Because okay, here's a really fun thing about LPC. We have like a swimming pool, and we have gym, and we have like a lot of like facilities. So sometimes I would just want to chill with my friends and go swim for like half an hour or something. So usually in the afternoon, I would either do like extracurricular activities or study or just hang out with friends. And then at night, because we live in a residential block, I can always just find my friends next door to study together or talk about like stuff, which is basically my day in the life of LPC. I don't really have any specific stuff to do, I guess. It's just actually learning and, you know, spending time with your friends. But then at the same time, because you're in school, it's more convenient because you don't have to spend a lot of time on like transports and everything, and you can really put more time and focus on like things that you really want to cherish or you really want to do.
Yeah, I guess for me, like we have a really similar day in our life, but apart from like doing stuff on campus, because I think the campus of LPC is in Wukaisha, and we have a really nice environment nearby. Sometimes we go to the beach, we take walks, and then it's a really nice place for us to de-stress and also spend time with friends. And also, I really like, sometimes going on the roof with our friends, and then we would stargaze and chat. And I guess one part I really like about studying in a boarding school is that you get to be around with your friends a lot, whether it's just having fun or studying together. It's actually a really good resource. For example, sometimes I study with my friends because a lot of subjects I take are very like essay based, or like it requires me to do a lot of like thinking after class. So having like for example, my history classmate lived next door, even my roommate, it's very convenient for us to do like academic like study sessions together. But also when we would like to have fun, it's also really convenient for us to just meet up and then just do different things together and enjoy school life in general.
Yeah, and as Brian said, Wukaisha is in a relatively more rural area in Hong Kong, I guess. So it's more like countryside, and we're so much more closer to nature, which is very different from my old school and my
Yeah.
home, because I lived in Hong Kong Island and I studied in Hong Kong Island. So I actually find it really, really fun because we're surrounded by like beaches and mountains, and we can always see the stars in the rooftop and everything. And we also have like a lot of trees, and the campus in general is really like nice and very natural for me. So that's also one thing I really like about LPC.
Yeah, and because like we do end class at 3:30, like it's actually similar to like the ending class time back our old school, but I feel like we have a more like free time here. For example, like after QC, sometimes we cook together with our friends, or we just do all sorts of different activities, which for example, even after check-in, we used to play like frisbee together, we play badminton together. And it's just like sometimes your friends feel like family to you, because
Yeah.
you do like all sorts of different stuff together, or like you clean your room together during Chinese New Year, which is I think a really fun part of school.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I think like studying in a boarding school, there's like a lot of advantages, especially like in the morning. I think like when the school starts again for you guys?
8:30.
8:30, right? yeah, for me back then, like I usually wake up like 5 minutes before class and then run to the class. And like this always happens, just saying. But then like sometimes like when we wake up late and then we're like, okay, I might miss breakfast. But then in fact, after you have your first class, usually we have a breakfast break and then people can actually go and have breakfast together. And I think that's like a very healthy way, because usually when I overslept for class I would like skip breakfast, but then because of this break I think like my health, my physical health is getting better. And I think another good thing is that because I think a lot of parents or like a lot of like class or upcoming classmates, like you guys have a concern is that, oh, because you're living in a boarding school, will you get directed away from your academics, or will you get distracted from like working on your essays? I would definitely say no, because like back then, because you know, like for IB, sometimes we have a lot of deadlines. And I remember like back then, because I recall you talk about the poll, and back then because um and the pool side, like there are different like tables there, and then people don't want to stay in their room to work because you know like because of the lights, so they all came to the pool side with their computer at like 2 a.m working on essays together. I think like that's a very supportive, you know, environment to study. And that's why I think, you know, study sessions always happens at like midnights. Yeah, you guys agree with that as well. And yeah, but how about like classes in UWC? Like, because how many people do you guys have in like a class usually?
Well, I think for LPC, we have quite a small class size. So maximum is 20 students in a class. And it really depends on like the subjects. But for example, for my English class, we only have like 11 students in a class, which is a very, very small class size, I think. Um, so I think have in a small class, you get the teachers can focus more on each student. So teachers here at LPC, we get a lot of like one-on-one meetings with your teachers. They really like try not just to like monitor your work progress, but actually trying to know your difficulties in the subjects, and like what areas you want to improve and how they could give you the support. I think they really want to support us and learning, because they know that everyone comes from very, very different curriculum and like education background. So I think that because we have a really small class size, really helps with us adapting to IB, and also it makes studying slightly easier at LPC, I guess.
Yeah, and because we have like a relatively smaller class sizes compared to my like to maybe DSC schools or other schools, it actually allows us to be more interactive in class. For example, for English literature, in my old school, it's usually just a teacher showing us the PowerPoints of the things that we learn about a poem, we just copy it down. But then in LPC, because we have smaller class sizes, we can each for English literature classes, we basically just have like a whole class discussion about the things, the texts, or the books that we read together. And because we have like less people, we can all share our opinions, we can exchange ideas, and it's like a very chill and free environment for us to like just share our own thoughts. So I actually like really like the class sizes in
Yeah.
LPC. Yeah.
And I guess also like the learning mode is very different, because back at my old school, we're very, very traditional. We use textbooks and like notes, paper notes, and everyone like no technology allowed. We just use paper and pen. But here, because like we use a lot of like um electronic or digital learning, so like there's all sorts of different resources for us to learn. For example, for global politics or history, we watch documentaries to learn. We don't only just look at like textbooks. And also in terms of like interaction, I remember for global politics classes, we learn about like, for example, different case studies. Instead of like the teachers giving us resources, the students ourselves, we make like materials for each other to learn. For example, I remember this time when we had to learn about different countries. So we were divided in groups, and then we had to make a whole video about the country. For example, one group was doing this notes on and like video on Sweden. And then they went to IKEA to take a video for our students. And it's a very fun and interactive way for us to learn, and also like peer learning and peer reviewing, I think.
So I think that's one of like the concerns. Do you guys have a lot of homework usually, like daily?
I guess we still have homework definitely, but then the format is very different because in my old school we have like a lot of exercises, for example, like grammar exercises, math exercises. So we have like a lot of homeworks. But in LPC, our homework or our assignments are usually more like bigger projects or essays. So we don't have to hand in like homework every single day, but we have different deadlines for different bigger projects, which we need to allocate the time ourselves on how we do the research, how we write it, how we analyze it. So I guess we don't have as much homework, but each homework requires like more effort and critical thinking.
Yeah. And I also think that homework is more about like, for example, self-directed learning and also learning before class. So sometimes, as I've mentioned, a lot of our classes are like class discussions. So for example, for language classes, you're supposed to like read the book before going attending classes, or you're supposed to complete some sort of assignment before you go to the class. So during class, you can ask teachers questions or you can do more discussions rather than compared to local schools. It's a lot about, you know, like training up your exam skills and also doing very repetitive work. But here it's more fun, and I would say homework is a very large part of learning instead of just, you know, training for exams.
Also talking about like the interactive mode of teaching, I remember you guys like starting from your previous year, you guys have a movable table, right? Like you guys, I heard from like some of my classmates that you guys, there are like classes that you guys can all like just stand and then with like some movable tables, and then you guys can stand with the tables. And those tables are also like whiteboards where you guys can write on it. Is that true?
Yeah, like the new classrooms we have like the tables where you can write on, and then like the walls of the classrooms are basically you can write with markers. And also there's a lot of like space in the academic block for us to do like small group discussions. I remember for one of our classes we went to like the courtyard, which is a big like grass area in our academic block, to have class discussions. We go to the pool side for discussions, and we have something called the Peace Center right now, which is basically like a common area for students to study. And then there's also like there's space for like group discussions, but then there's also space for like if you want to be alone, like if you want to study alone, there's like small cubicles sort of like where you can focus on your own and then just do your own work.
Yeah, so I think in LPC classes are not just limited to like classrooms, but also like different kind of environment. Like it's more relaxing and more flexible, I guess, for us to choose where we want to like do our homework or where we want to have like class discussions and stuff.
Yeah, I totally agree with that as well. Because I think back in our previous schools, at least for me, you know, sometimes when you just go to class, you feel very sleepy and you just kind of fall asleep during classes. But then in LPC, I would say it's quite impossible because you always like move around, like interact with like your buddy or like the teacher. And like what you guys said, you guys might walk to like the courtyard and to read the book together. And I also heard not my class, but then another class, do you guys have like a break in between, like a 1 minute walk or something? Like you guys walk around a courtyard for like a few minutes to take a break. And I think that's something I would say previous schools, like traditional schools, wouldn't really do. And these like interactive classes, I would say it's kind of more effective for me as well, because at least like I'm actually paying attention to it and I'm actually engaged to it. So yeah, I agree with that as well. And okay, and then before that, we talk about like in our previous questions, we kind of talked about IAs and EEs and TOKs. Do you guys want to elaborate more about it?
So for IB, we have like special assignments or projects that are called internal assessments and extended essay. So maybe I'll talk about internal assessments, like which we call IAs, and maybe Brianne can talk about EEs, like extended essay. So for internal assessment, it is basically kind of like a big project for each subject. So for example, for biology IA, you have to make your own research questions, design your own experiments, and do your own experiments. And for global politics, our internal assessment is to join different NGOs activities and interview maybe political leaders to write an essay. So internal assessments are kind of like big projects in each of your subject, and they can be different depending on your subject. But then you really need, it's kind of like assignments that you need to spend more time on, and you need to be more creative in, because they're all your own ideas. So it's not like we have any like specific guidelines or like topics to follow. We can just think of like things that we're interested in and study into it. But then the teacher will still give us like support, and they will still give us like, they will have meetings with us to guide us and to kind of tell us, um, remind us what to do for those projects. So yeah, internal assessments are like bigger projects, but we only have 1 to 2 IAs for each subject in the whole 2 years of IB, so it wouldn't be too much workload, and we also have like sufficient amount of time to actually do our own projects and research.
Yes. As for extended essay, it's something like IA, but it's much bigger. So internal assessment is usually around like 1,500 to 2,500 words, something like that. But for extended essays, it's around like 4,000 word. So it's like a really, really long essay, and you can get to focus on one specific subject you really like. For example, if you're really interested in English, then you can do your extended essay in English, or you can do your extended essay in history, and you look into a specific topic you're interested in. For example, I'm doing my extended essay in English, and I'm analyzing this movie that I watched. And for example, I can like find a global issue within the movie and elaborate on how, for example, the cinema, how like the characters inside the movies brought out this global issue, or and just generally analyze a topic that I'm really interested in. For example, I know that students who are interested in economics can find, for example, like behavioral economics problem to focus on, and they can do surveys and interview different students and actually get to learn stuff they're interested in, and sort of like get prepared for like university, and like looking more into what they want to study in the future and something like that. Okay.
Do you find these like assessments or like extended essay hard though? Because you guys talk about like you guys take like the DSE before, and then you guys now have to like write such long essays. Like, do you find it hard, or do you find it like hard, but then you guys are also enjoying it?
For me, at first, it's quite challenging because I've never like I've never done like any assignments which I don't have any guidelines to follow, which is just purely my own ideas and my own designs. So at first, I was pretty confused because like I was so used to the DSC curriculum where we all have like guidelines to follow, and we have to do each homework according to what a teacher teach us to do. So at first, it's quite difficult for me to come up with my own ideas, my own experiments. But then later on, I get used to it, and I also get a lot of support from my teachers, from one-on-one meetings to different resources that they recommend us to take a look at. So I actually find it very enjoyable now, because we can actually spend so much more time and effort into things that are really interesting to us. So for example, for my I'm doing it on global politics, so I can actually spend so much time on it, and I can design my own question. I can actually, learn about the topics that I'm actually interested in, instead of like following a guidelines, like a general guidelines that are given by like teachers. So I really enjoy it, and even though it's quite challenging at first, I think it's really worth it to, transit to IB and have these kind of assessments and projects.
And I think especially because in LPC we have a teacher in charge for your extended essay, as I remember. So I think during the whole time when you're preparing it, when there's a teacher there guiding you or helping you to kind of proofread a bit, I think with that support, I guess it's kind of better for me as well. Because at first, when I was like told to do like 3,000 word essay, I'm like, what? Like I cannot even like foresee how am I gonna write it. But as a university student, I also kind of think IB with all these essays, all these assignments, I think it's actually a great like bridge to kind of connect to university as well. Because in university, we always have to write these like 3,000 words essays. And back then, and when I'm taking IB, I'm like, this is totally insane. But then now, after going to uni, after taking IB, I would definitely say IB actually helped me to get used to university as well. Yeah. And what about theory of knowledge? Sounds very fancy. What is that?
So theory of knowledge, like TOK in short, is sort of like, I guess that's something similar to like philosophy. So you sort of learn why you're learning. So the subject is very interesting, and I find it very interesting because I think it really allows me to think a lot and reflect a lot. So for example, um, theory of knowledge, you learn about what are knowledge, what are facts, what are opinions. Like it's very like hard to understand at first, but then for me, I find TOK lessons really fun because partly because of my teacher, she finds really interactive and fun ways for us to, you know, really reflect on why we're learning. And I guess learning about TOK, it sort of like motivated me to not only learn, but then question why I'm learning and how I'm learning and also what I'm learning. For example, we reflect on things we see in daily life, and actually like a lot of like TOK concepts or a lot of like different, we can look at stuff in different perspectives, and I find that the subject very interesting. And I think that it's something very very different from local school because you learn a lot, but then you never stop and think why you're learning and what's you're actually learning. So I think I like the subject a lot because even for IB, you take in a lot of knowledge, but then learning TOK, it sort of helps you to like understand why you're trying to learn this like specific topic and why it is important for you, I guess.
Yeah, and I think TOK lessons really encourage me and my critical thinking skills because you really have to, use your brain and think a lot for the TOK lessons and the topics that we cover. And also, one thing that I really like about TOK is that we don't have any exams on TOK. We have an essay and also an exhibition, which we focus and discuss on like a topic that we choose ourselves, and we discuss the knowledge behind it and the reasons behind why we learn about it. So I guess without the pressure of having like an actual exam that we need to study for, TOK is much more fun and interesting in general.
Yeah, I totally agree with that as well. I think at the very beginning when I took TOK, like the first class, like it was a mind-blowing class. I remember that because I remember at the very beginning there are questions like, are is math invented or created? Or like for my TOK essay question, it was wait. It was like, do good explanations have to be true? Like these are very like deep questions that you wouldn't like question yourself when you're like on a street or somewhere. So I think TOK is actually a subject that kind of brings you more kind of think more, I would say, and also kind of bring back a lot of different aspects when you think as well. Yeah. And I guess we can move on to our last question. So, what is your most memorable UWC story?
So for me, I guess the most unforgettable experience for me is actually a midnight chat with one of my friends from Madagascar. I remember it was a Friday night, and we just randomly went to the rooftop because we wanted to drink hot chocolate and talk. It was a winter night, and then we stayed up there until 3 a.m. talking about like stuff in our lives. And that was very unforgettable for me because that night was actually when I really understand and learn about the country of Madagascar. My previous knowledge about Madagascar is very like, I guess it's quite funny, but I learned about Madagascar through the cartoon Madagascar, where there's like this penguins and zebras and elephants and lions escaping to this really beautiful tropical island. So for me, I always thought that Madagascar is this really like, nice country with like a lot of animals, and it's like just a paradise for people. But then after that 3 a.m. night chat with my friend from Madagascar, I heard her own story and her own experiences in her home country, and I learned that Madagascar is it's still pretty, like it's still very like naturally pretty, but then at the same time I learned about the actual situations that they have, the problems that they face. And I guess it really reminds me that I'm not living inside a bubble, but I actually have to learn more about different things that are happening in the world. And yeah, so I think that's like the experience that can sum up my whole like year in LPC, which is like learning about different countries from my friends and living in a residential block so I can like spend a lot of time with them. Yeah.
As for me, I think I don't really have one really, really memorable, like one specific moment. But I think for me, something that's very memorable in UWC is just my daily like interactions and also memories with my friends. I think that because we do a lot of things together, it makes school life really unique and special. Even if it's like the smallest thing we do, sometimes I look back into what we did last year. I think it's very like unforgettable for me because I've never thought that I would have an experience like this. But then if I were to choose something very special, I would say that it's like preparing for cultural evenings. So at our school there are different 7 cultural groups on campus, and then we have different cultural evenings to for the cultural groups to sort of showcase our own unique culture. So I'm part of Chinese cultural evening, and then I'm also on like the organizing committee for the show this year. So throughout the few months last year, I had a lot of meetings with different liaison members within the committee, and then we prepared a lot for the show. And I think throughout the progress, it was very unforgettable because I learned a lot about more about my own culture, and also I created a lot of like really unique memories with my friends. And also, as I said, I really enjoy a lot of extracurricular activities, so that was a very memorable experience for me because I got a lot of like hands-on experience of doing a fully student-led activity.
All right, then I guess your stories can sum up our sharing session. And because we got quite a lot of questions today, so I guess we can kind of move on to our Q&A session. So let's start with our first question. Would you like to elaborate on what you do and learn in global politics? I think, Vanessa, you take global politics, right?
Brienne and I both take global politics, but I guess I can first share on it, and Brienne maybe can give some extra information if I miss any. So, global politics is actually a subject that is available in IB. So, we don't have the subject in DSC curriculum, but we do have it in IB curriculum, and we can study it in LPC. So, for global politics, we basically learn about different concepts and case studies related to politics. So for our first topic, we learn about power, sovereignty, and legitimacy. So we learn about different political concepts. For example, what is power? What are different kinds of power? What can power do? How power affects the stage of global politics. And we also learn about actual case studies of how power is influencing the world and different specific cases around different countries. So for global politics, I guess the main thing that we learn is different political concepts, knowledge about those politics, and also some real life case studies that we can discuss and talk about, so that we can understand more deeply about the concept. And also for global politics, we have a lot of class discussions and essays, which require us to do our own research and come up with our own ideas. So it's quite different from like other subjects where we have like specific, I guess, textbooks or stuff to learn about, because in global politics it's mainly just class discussions and us sharing our own ideas and learning about other people's ideas.
Yeah, so I think that global politics is like for students who are interested in like studying politics in the future or like international relations is a really good like introduction to the subjects, I guess. And also I think first of all, not a lot of international schools in Hong Kong offer global politics as a subject. And what makes LPC extra special for offering the subjects is because your classmates in class are actually from around the world, so you get different perspectives. For example, in our class, I think we have like 20 students around, and then most students are international and they come from all different continents. So that's why when you learn about the topics there, you actually get different perspectives. I remember last year, one of our case studies was about Iraq, and then we actually had a student who was from Iraq, and then she shared her own perspective. Or we learned more about like one of our topics was human rights. So we learned about like sweat factories in Bangladesh. And we also had like a student from Bangladesh, and then she shared her views on the topic and what she knows. Because sometimes I think living in Hong Kong, we only get one perspective of the global issue, but then hearing from people who actually come from that country is a very interesting way to learn about the subjects and gives you genuine perspective into the issue.
But then, since you guys did not like take anything like any subjects related to global politics beforehand, do you find it hard when you first take this subjects?
I think for me, because liberal studies wasn't actually like, it's sort of similar in a sense that like you learn about what's happening in society or like around you. um but for me, I've been always interested in like this area of knowledge, I guess. And I also did model in United Nations, which is very similar to like international relations. And I guess I've always been aware of like certain political topics. And also I, on my own time, I like to read a lot about like things about politics. And also I generally enjoy doing like research and I guess writing essays. So I guess it wasn't too hard for me because I've always been like interested in it. And also maybe like previous curriculum also gave me some sort of like training for it.
Okay, then let's move on to our second question. So, do we get to take all the subjects or some for a trial period in the beginning? And how did you decide which subjects to take? And how would you recommend making that decision?
So the first week that we came into LPC, we have a thing called orientation week, which is a whole week where we don't have to go to school, but we have different like activities and workshops that introduce IB to us. So there's a session in the orientation week where we learn about different subjects. So different subject teachers will introduce the subject to us and give us like a basic idea of what that subject is about. So I guess that's the first thing that can like make you realize or help you discover what subjects you're actually interested in or what's like suitable for you for your future studies. And also for the trial period, we don't get to try out all the subjects at the same time, but you can choose like the first 6 subjects that you prefer. And um, throughout the whole term one, you can always, change subjects or change level of difficulties when you feel like it's not like interesting or suitable for you anymore. So you can always just tell a tutor and ask him or her to help you change your subject. So I guess for the orientation week workshops, you get like a general idea of what the subjects you're about, and you kind of learn about what subjects that you want to study. And when you actually study the subject, you always have a choice on whether to change the subject or to change the difficulty level.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that as well. Because I think at the very beginning, especially since we did not take IB beforehand, it's quite hard for us to like plan ahead, like what we want to study. But then I would say it's better for you to get to an idea like what you want to study in a university, because usually for unis, they highly recommend you to study a particular subject during high school or during high IB. So I would say that's a better idea of it. But then of course, it's not a must for you to like plan ahead. Like I want to be a doctor in the future or something. But then I would just recommend that. And moving on to our third question. So how serious is LPC on a CAS aspect? So even if a person isn't like that active, do you think if it's like um do you think if being active is important for you to participate in CAS, or what do you think about that?
I think in terms of being serious, CAS is a really big part of like LPC life, but then I think it's different from other like international schools that do IB. I think our school really stresses that you do CAS not to fulfill the IB requirement, but to actually do stuff you're passionate about. For example, we can start a lot of like our own projects we're interested in. Um, so for example, a lot of like all QCs, which are like extracurriculars on campus, are led by students. And if you're interested in a certain like topic, or let's say a certain sport, you can start your own school club or your own student projects on campus. So I wouldn't say that it's serious, as in everyone here likes to find something they're interested in and be very involved in the topic. Um, but as for if you're not a very like active student, I think it's still fine, because I think a lot of students, including me, I found my interest after coming to LPC. Like at LPC, you can always try out all sorts of different activities and all sorts of different areas. So I think that if you're worried about, not being active enough, it's still fine. Like you can just always just come, and then everyone's really friendly in terms of like trying out different QCs, and just generally learning about different topics when you first come.
Yeah, I just want to add on that CAS activities and also academics in LPC is not like a requirement or like a fulfillment, because LPC doesn't just, focus or put a lot of stress on how well you perform, but actually your, I guess, kind of your potential of being a change maker, or how self-reflective you are, how aware are you about yourself, about the world. So I guess for CAS activities and academics in LPC, it's not like a pressure that you have to bear, or it's not like a requirement that you have to fulfill, but something that will help you to grow and understand more about yourself. So I guess that's also one thing in application process, that LPC doesn't really focus on like how well you perform in academics or how many extracurricular activities you joined before, but more about like self-reflective questions of how you think of yourself, how you want to improve, how you want to change the world. So yeah, I just want to add that point too. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think it's quite a myth that LPC focuses on academics a lot. I think that's quite a myth. And I would just say be yourself during your application process. That's basically the advice. And moving on to our fourth question. So, may I know if students can leave the campus freely, or do they need permission after school? And are you guys allowed like to have different classes during the weekend? Like for example, if they have to leave school for music instrument classes, are they allowed to?
So for LPC, we can actually leave campus like all the time, I guess. As long as you don't have classes, you're actually allowed to leave campus. So you don't have to, request for permission to leave campus, as long as you're back before curfew time. So for now, our curfew time for Sundays to Thursdays are 9 p.m. And for Friday nights and Saturday nights, our curfew is 11 p.m. So in the meantime, as long as you don't have any classes or any activities that required your attendance at school, you can always feel free to go out for instrumental classes, or just to hang out with friends, or just to take a break from studying. So for me, I personally still take piano classes after coming to LPC, and I also go to church during the weekends, and I also go home during the weekend to visit my family. So that's why I think it's actually very free in LPC, that you're allowed to go in and out of campus. Just be aware that you have to come back before curfew time, and you can't stay overnight, and that's all.
Yeah, and during long holidays, for example, like Easter holidays, sometimes the school might allow you guys to like go back home for like a few days consecutively, and yeah, but that's a exception. And as time is short, we can accommodate only one more question. So in group one, there's English language and English literature. So is there a difference?
So yeah, so for like language A, like so for languages you have like basically three levels. So like language ab initio, which is for like students who have not studied that language before. For example, we have like French ab, Spanish ab, and Mandarin ab. And the second level will be like B. Like for example, if you've studied the language for a couple years, but then you're not native, then the students would probably choose like language level B. And for language A, you have like so it's usually like students take like Chinese or English A. So then you can choose between language and literature and the pure literature. So for me, I do English lang lit, but then I do Chinese literature. So I think the biggest difference is that for language and literature, you study a wider range of text types. As I've mentioned, for language and literature, sometimes we watch movies, we analyze like news articles, and then we analyze song lyrics and just all sorts of different text types. But then for literature, it's mostly only poems, novels, and like plays. I think like it's like there's like more narrow text type like selection you have. But then as for language and literature, you study a wider range of text types. So I think that it really depends on what you're interested in, and also like maybe your prior knowledge. For example, if Vanessa, she studied literature back her old school, then she probably would choose literature because she has the experience in studying that. But then if you're interested in exploring more choices and like not only focusing on reading specific text types, then maybe language and literature would be more suitable for you.
All right, and I guess that's all. So I see quite a lot of questions, but then we kind of choose some questions that only related to our topic today. So about UWC and why UWC academics. So unfortunately, we did not answer the rest of the questions, but remember to stay tuned to our other sessions, which is gonna be tomorrow, and then also gonna be having it on next week. So for next week, we're gonna on 9th of September, just to clarify, we're gonna talk about EOTC and residential life. So stay tuned for that. And thank you very much for our speakers today, Brian and Vanessa. So it has been a wonderful sharing, and I'm very happy to hear about your experience and all about your UWC journey. And yeah.
Yeah, thank you for having us. We're really happy to share our experiences about like our past year, and we're really excited that people are actually interested in LPC, because I personally really enjoy studying in LPC, and I feel really happy about my decision. So yeah.
And we hope we see everyone here applying for LPC.
Please. All right, thank you guys, and thank you for listening today.